everybody, this is John for MTG Nexus coming at you with another deck overview. This time we are looking at 5-color Domain Zoo. As a friendly reminder, if you do like these informative modern videos, please consider subscribing to the channel, giving us a thumbs up, leaving a constructive comment down below, and maybe letting us know what deck you might like to see done next. So 5-color Domain Zoo is a deck that has existed for some amount of time, but has recently gotten a shot in the arm with the printing of Leyline Binding, as many of the 4 and 5 color decks in the format do. This is a deck mainly built around maximizing the card Tribal Flames, which is a burn spell that deals damage equal to the number of basic land types you control. So if you happen to have 3 basic land types, mountain, forest, plains, it does 3 damage. If it happens to do 4, you happen to have all 4 or all 5, you happen to do 4 or 5 damage to any target. Then it plays off of a bunch of threats that get more powerful due to domain, things like Territorial Kavu, which get +1/+1 for each land type you control, and then Sign of Draco, which is a 12 mana 4/4 flyer that becomes 2 mana cheaper for each basic land type you control. And each creature you control has Vigilance if it's white, Hexproof if it's blue, Lifelink if it's black, First Strike if it's red, Trample if it's green. Basically, it helps to pump up the rest of your creatures with different abilities. Kind of rounding this all up, you play the ever-present Ragavan Nimble Pilferer. You play Wild Nacatl because, well, you're playing red-based deck with plains and forests in it to pump this up to a 3/3. Nayashoba Brawler is a new one from Dominaria United, which its power is equal to the number of basic land types you control. Basically, you have a bunch of overpowered zoo-esque creatures backed up by a bunch of burn spells, things like Lightning Bolt, Tribal Flames. Some of these lists used to play Lightning Helix and such. Now you're playing Leyline Binding as a cheap removal spell to get your other opponent's creatures out of the way, and then playing some utility cards around it. Things like Stubborn Denial becomes a 1-mana negate often in this deck. Spell Pierce helps to disrupt what your opponent's doing a little bit. Dromoka's Command can help counter a burn spell and have one of your creatures fight one of your opponent's creatures, as well as forcing them to sacrifice enchantments, which can be relevant against things like Blood Moon. Then Run 6 is ever present in these 5-color decks, helps to fix your mana a little bit worse in this deck, as you're not really a mid-range deck taking advantage of this, but does help to fix your mana a little bit. Makes it easier to find, if you play 2 lands, one of them's a fetch land, Ren helps you fix your mana the rest of the game. And then, the rest of the deck, you're just kind of this aggressive deck trying to kill your opponent fairly quickly. Sideboard, playing a bunch of good spells, Rest in Peace for any type of Living End, Dredge, Murktide Shenanigans, Flusterstorm for any type of combo or control decks, fairly good against blue-white control, fairly good against the various Cascade piles. Same thing with Teferi, good against anything with counter spells or cascading spells. Hitsugu Consumes All, happens to be quite good against decks like Hammer Time and such, which have a bunch of 1-mana permanents. Also can be reasonable against things like Affinity, and also it's a little bit slow, but helps to nuke the graveyard in addition to Rest in Peace. Get to play Gigantha, and then Wear Terror for any type of problematic enchantments or artifacts, so Blood Moon, Urza Saga, Hammer, etc. There are a couple different variants of the deck. This one is a little bit of a go bigger version. It's playing some of the Cascade spells like Shardless Agent and Bloodbraid Elf, pairing it with, once again, still Territorial Kavu, Lightning Helix, Tribal Flames, Lightning Bolt. You get to play a couple copies of Ignoble Hierarch to help accelerate you. Notice you're playing a little bit more lands in this deck, so the curve is a little bit higher in this deck, but you still get to play Leyline Binding, Sign of Draco, and then this version is also playing General Ferocous Rokruk, which has Hexproof for multicolor, not protection. And whenever you cast a multicolored spell, you get to create a 4/4 red and white golem artifact creature. And a card that is a blast from the past, Geist of St. Trath, which is a 2/2 hexproof creature. Whenever it attacks target creature, you create a 4/4 white angel token with flying. It's tapped and attacking, exile this at the end of combat. So it's a 2/2 hexproof creature that happens to attack for 6 mana. And if you're able to clear the way with your Tribal Flames, your Lightning Helixes, your Bolts, and your Leyline Bindings, this is a card that can threaten to win the game quite quickly, and unless your opponent has either a blocker or a sweeper spell, you're generally not going to be able to remove this. Still have the Sign of Draco. Obviously the land base is a little bit different because you're running 22 instead of 20, or 23 instead of 22 lands. Rest in Peace still ever present. Alpine Moon for any type of Tron, Amulet Titan, Urza Saga Shenanigans. Valakut, also another card you might want to tag with this. Lavinia, very good against the Cascade decks, very good against Tron and such. Unmoored Ego against any type of combo or deck relying on one card. So Indomitable Creativity, check. Amulet Titan, check. Basically anything relying upon one card. The Living End decks, etc. Hitsugo we've already kind of covered. D-Reb, much the same way as Wear Tear, but this also allows you to do a little bit of damage as you're destroying the artifact or enchantment. And then Knight of Autumn is kind of a flexible threat that either can come down as a 4/3 creature, can destroy target artifact or enchantment, or gain you a little bit of life against a deck like Burn, which oftentimes this deck can struggle with a little bit because of how much damage you're taking from your land base. Finally, the third variant, a little bit more similar to what we saw in the first match, other than you're playing Teferi Time Raveler in the main deck. It's kind of a hedge while also being a tempo play. You're not playing the Lightning Helixes, but you still have Bold, Tribal Flames, and Leyline Binding to deal with what your opponent's doing. As far as the sideboard, get to play Chalice the Voids for any type of the various Cascade nonsense, along with Teferi Time Raveler. 4 copies of Force of Vigor for any type of, Blood Moon, Urza's Saga, etc. nonsense, Affinity, Hammer Time. Molten Rain as kind of your land hate of choice against decks like Amulet Titan, Tron, etc. Also decent against Valakut. And Shadow Prophecy as an interesting kind of grindy card. Allows you to look at the top X cards of the library, where X is the number of lands you control, or X is the number of basic lands you control. Take 2 of them, put the rest in the graveyard. Overall, a little bit of a grindy card. Not like a Planeswalker or something that some of these decks historically have run, or aggro decks sometimes run when they're trying to be a little bit more resilient. But as a card that might be able to get you there, might be able to find your last copy of Tribal Flames to kill your 4 or 5 color Omnath opponent before they can get nuts. And overall, this is just another take on an aggressive deck that happens to be taking advantage of the printing of Leyline Binding, and is certainly an interesting treat to play. A little bit tricky with the mana-based fetching sometimes, but overall, very powerful, fast, aggressive deck that has a little bit of disruption to try to stop your opponent from stopping what you're doing. And, historically, these decks have been very good against combo-based decks, or decks like Tron and such, while also being a little bit struggling against decks like Blue-White Control, 4 or 5 color Omnath. But, definitely a deck you should try out if you enjoy having decks that are a little bit off the beaten path. And as always, if you like these kind of deck overviews, please consider subscribing to the channel, giving us a thumbs up, leaving a constructive comment down below, and letting us know what deck you might like to see us cover next.